Seth explains why some souls reincarnate instantly and others wait centuries, you die. And then nothing happens, or does it? Here's what they don't tell you in any mainstream teaching. The moment after death isn't darkness. It's not a tunnel. It's not even silence. It's awareness, pure, undiluted, impossibly awake. You're still here, still thinking, still feeling. But the body, that familiar anchor you've carried for decades, is gone. And in that microsecond of recognition, when consciousness realizes it has survived its own ending, a question emerges that will shape everything that comes next. What now? I spent years studying what Seth calls the between space, that luminous pause between one life and the next. And what I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about death, rebirth, and the architecture of the soul. Because here's the secret they've been hiding. Reincarnation isn't a conveyor belt. It's not a system where you die, wait your turn, and get assigned your next body by some cosmic bureaucrat shuffling papers in the afterlife. It's a choice. A deliberate, conscious, deeply personal choice. But here's where it gets shocking. Some souls make that choice instantly. They die and return to flesh within hours, sometimes minutes, pulled back by forces so magnetic they can barely resist. Others vanish from the reincarnational cycle for centuries, withdrawing into dimensions most of us can't even imagine, doing work we'll explore later in this video. Why? What determines whether your soul plunges immediately back into matter or lingers in that space between worlds for what we'd measure as lifetimes? Seth revealed the answer in teachings that were considered too dangerous for mainstream publication. And what he taught contradicts nearly everything you've been told about karma, soul age, and spiritual evolution. The first clue is this. Time, as you experience it, doesn't exist where the soul makes its decisions. When you're standing at that threshold, freed from the tyranny of clocks and calendars, a single moment of reflection can contain centuries of earth time. Or centuries of processing can compress into an instant of return. Your soul doesn't measure time. It measures completion, readiness, the weight of unfinished business versus the pull of new possibility. By the end of this video, you'll understand the invisible laws governing your soul's return. You'll know why some deaths lead to immediate rebirth, while others open into vast pauses of integration and rest. You'll discover what Seth calls the 3 laws of soul timing, and you'll learn something that might disturb you at first, but will ultimately set you free. Your next life might be closer or farther than you ever imagined, and it's always been your choice. Most people think reincarnation works like a ticket system at the DMV. You die, you take your number, you wait your turn in some ethereal waiting room until your name gets called for the next available body. It's a comforting image, orderly, fair, predictable. It's also completely wrong. Here's what Seth revealed that shattered this illusion. There is no cosmic queue, no karmic bureaucracy, no divine sorting system where souls shuffle forward in line based on how enlightened they were in their last life. The entire framework of waiting your turn is a projection of physical reality's rules onto a dimension where those rules don't apply. Instead, reincarnation operates through what Seth calls psychic magnetism. Your soul isn't pushed back into physical reality by external forces. It's pulled, drawn like iron to a magnet by the intensity of its own unresolved focus. Think about it. When you're alive, what captures your attention? Not what you think you should focus on, but what actually grips you, sometimes against your will. Unfinished conversations, unsolved problems, loves that ended too soon, dreams you never got to complete. That magnetic pull doesn't end with death. If anything, it intensifies. Seth teaches that the soul carries what he calls psychic charge, accumulated energy from experiences, relationships, and purposes that remain alive in consciousness even after the body stops. And here's the revelation that changes everything. The stronger that charge, the faster the return. This overturns nearly every popular reincarnation myth. The concept of old souls versus new souls becomes infinitely more nuanced when you realize a soul can reincarnate instantly into multiple timelines simultaneously, experiencing what we'd call different centuries as concurrent events. Or it can withdraw into what Seth calls Framework 2, the inner reality of consciousness where all probable events exist. to observe, to heal, to expand its understanding before choosing another dive into flesh. The so-called waiting period isn't passive. It's not punishment for past failures or a mandatory cool-down between incarnations. It's an active process of psychic digestion, pattern recognition, creative preparation. Imagine a diver standing at the edge of an Olympic pool. Some divers leap immediately, craving the shock of impact, the rush of submersion, the challenge of breaking through water's resistance. They don't need to think. They need to act. The desire to dive is so overwhelming it becomes the dive itself. Others sit at the edge, watching. They study how light refracts through water. They observe other divers, learning from every entry, every splash, every technique. They're not afraid. They're not procrastinating. They're preparing for a dive so perfect, so precisely executed, that when they finally move, it will be a masterpiece. Both approaches are valid. Both produce extraordinary results. Neither is superior. Your soul knows which type of diver it is. And here's what might shock you. It might be both simultaneously in different streams of incarnation. The myth of the cosmic cue teaches us that reincarnation happens to us. Seth's teaching reveals that reincarnation is something we do, a creative act, an artistic choice, a strategic decision made with full awareness and absolute freedom, even if you don't remember making it. Here's where it gets shocking. Why does one soul reincarnate within hours while another stays in the afterdeath for 300 years? Seth revealed 3 invisible laws that govern this timing, and once you understand them, you'll never see your own life or death the same way again. Law 1. The intensity principle. Souls reincarnate quickly when they carry what Seth calls unspent momentum, a psychic charge so powerful it acts like gravitational pull, drawing consciousness back into matter almost instantly. This happens most dramatically with deaths that are sudden, violent, or profoundly unfinished. The young soldier killed in battle, his last thought a promise to return home. The mother separated from her child by accident or illness, her love so fierce it refuses dissolution. The artist who died mid-masterpiece, the scientist on the verge of breakthrough, the revolutionary silenced mid-speech. These souls don't drift peacefully into the between space. They ricochet back into physical reality with almost magnetic force, pulled by the sheer intensity of interrupted purpose. Seth explains this through what he calls continuity of focus. When you're deeply engaged in physical reality, when your attention is completely absorbed in a project, a relationship, a mission, death doesn't automatically sever that engagement. The focus persists. And focus, in the multidimensional universe Seth describes, is the primary creative force. Where your attention goes, your reality follows. Even across the boundary of death. This is why children who remember past lives almost universally describe deaths that were sudden or young. The psychic momentum never cooled. The intensity never dispersed. They returned so quickly that the membrane between lives remained thin, porous, allowing memories to bleed through. Law 2. The mastery pause. Now here's the opposite pattern. Souls who have completed a major cycle of learning often choose to linger, not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from a desire to integrate. Seth calls this the harvest period. After completing a particularly intense cluster of incarnations, the soul withdraws into Framework 2 to review not just one life, but entire strands of probable selves. Every choice you made generated alternate realities. Every decision point created branches where other versions of you explored different paths. The mastery pause is when your soul steps back to observe the entire tree, not just the branch you lived. This can take what we'd measure as centuries. But from the soul's perspective, it's a single, timeless moment of profound understanding. You're not waiting for your next life. You're extracting wisdom from thousands of lives simultaneously, pulling the essence from experience, composing the next phase of your eternal education. These are the souls mystics sometimes encounter in deep meditation or near-death experiences, entities who feel ancient, wise, but somehow not distant. They're not absent. They're simply operating from a dimension where the lessons of flesh have been metabolized into something more refined. Law 3. The relationship anchor. Here's the law that explains more than any other. Souls rarely reincarnate alone. Seth teaches that you belong to what he calls a reincarnational cluster, a group of entities who incarnate together across multiple lives, playing different roles in each other's dramas. Your mother in this life might have been your student in another. Your greatest enemy might be your most beloved teacher from a different century. These relationships aren't random. They're agreements made at the soul level, contracts designed to facilitate mutual growth through the friction and beauty of shared experience. And here's the revelation. If your inner family is still processing shared lessons, you may delay your return to stay synchronized with them. Not because you're forced to wait, but because the next chapter of your collective story requires certain pieces to be in place before it can unfold. Your soul doesn't measure time in years. It measures time in completion. And sometimes completion means allowing other members of your cluster to finish their current roles before you all reconvene for the next act. This is why grief feels so profound when we lose someone we love. It's not just this lifetime's relationship you're mourning. It's the recognition, usually unconscious, that a member of your eternal family has temporarily withdrawn from the play. But here's the comfort Seth offers. They will return. You will meet again. The bonds that matter are indestructible, woven into the fabric of your multi-dimensional identity. Your soul doesn't measure time. It measures completion. And when the time is right, when the lessons are harvested, when the cluster is ready, when the new chapter beckons with irresistible clarity, you'll dive back in. Together. Imagine dying and waking up again before your old body is even buried. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? But Seth describes something he calls hot reincarnation, when the soul's emotional charge is so volatile, so magnetically alive, that it bypasses the usual after-death rest entirely. These are the souls who die with their hands still reaching for what they couldn't finish. The passion isn't just strong, it's incandescent. It's a fire that doesn't extinguish when the body fails. It simply seeks new fuel. Meet the archetype Seth calls the unfinished soul. The painter who died before completing their vision. Their last breath a whispered, "Not yet." The mother torn from her infant by sudden illness. Her love so absolute it becomes a bridge back to flesh. The revolutionary cut down mid-manifesto. Their final thought, not of death, but of the words that still needed to be spoken. These souls don't forget their previous lives immediately. Seth reveals something that contradicts popular reincarnation theory. Instant returners often carry residual memories, not as vague impressions or symbolic dreams, but as detailed, visceral recall that bleeds through childhood, like watercolor through thin paper. They're the 3-year-olds who describe specific locations they've never visited. The children who recognize people they've never met. The young souls who carry old wounds, birthmarks where bullets entered, phobias that match previous deaths, knowledge that has no source in current experience. This isn't malfunction. It's continuity. The soul returns so quickly that the psychic imprint of the previous incarnation remains fresh, unprocessed, still radiating heat. But here's what Seth warns us about, and this is crucial. Speed isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's not passion that drags a soul back instantly. It's obsession, addiction, a refusal to release control. Seth describes souls trapped in what he calls repetitive loops, returning again and again to the same types of situations, relationships, or substances because they never pause to examine the pattern. The alcoholic who dies and immediately seeks a body predisposed to addiction. The control-obsessed parent who returns to dominate another generation. The victim who reincarnates as another victim, unconsciously seeking familiar territory. Instant reincarnation, Seth teaches, can be either mastery or entrapment. The difference lies in awareness. Did you return because you consciously chose the challenge, or because you were helplessly magnetized by unexamined compulsion? This is why Seth emphasizes the importance of what happens in those crucial moments after death. If you die in a state of conscious awareness, understanding that you're transitioning, that you have choices, that you're not your wounds or your addictions, you retain agency. You can pause, reflect. Choose whether to dive back immediately or to take the time Framework 2 offers for deeper integration, But if you die unconscious of your true nature, so identified with the dramas and desires of physical reality that you can't distinguish self from circumstance, the magnetic pull can be overwhelming. You might find yourself back in flesh before you even realize you left it. The lesson isn't to fear instant reincarnation. Many souls choose it deliberately as an advanced practice, maintaining continuity across lives, building momentum across incarnations, accelerating their education through sustained focus. The lesson is this: the fastest return isn't always the wisest growth. Sometimes the most powerful thing a soul can do is pause, step back and ask, am I returning because I'm ready? Or because I'm running? Your soul knows the difference, even if your conscious mind doesn't yet. Now we turn to the other extreme. The souls who vanish from the reincarnational cycle for centuries. Seth calls them the contemplators, entities who deliberately withdraw into framework. Not to escape physical reality, but to serve it from a different dimension. And here's what shocked me when I first understood this. These souls aren't idle. They're not hiding. They're not avoiding the work of incarnation. They're doing a different kind of work entirely. Seth reveals that the word waiting is a profound misnomer. These souls become what he describes as inner plane guides, consciousness operating from the non-physical realms, offering intuitive nudges, dream teachings, and creative inspiration to those still in bodies. Have you ever had an insight that felt like it came from outside yourself? A sudden solution to an impossible problem? A creative breakthrough that arrived fully formed, as if downloaded from somewhere else? Seth suggests these moments are often the work of non-incarnate entities, members of your own reincarnational cluster or other souls who've chosen to teach from the other side. Some of history's greatest leaps were seeded this way. Artistic revolutions, scientific breakthroughs, spiritual awakenings that seemed to arrive simultaneously in multiple locations, as if the idea itself was being broadcast from another frequency, because it was. Seth explains that souls who choose the long road often do so after completing what he calls brutal cycles, multiple incarnations in war-torn eras, lives dominated by survival, periods where physical reality was so intense that the soul needs what he terms a reincarnational sabbatical. Imagine living 10 consecutive lives of poverty, violence, or oppression. Not because you're being punished, but because you chose to master those particular frequencies of experience. After such a cycle, the soul might retreat into Framework 2 for subjective millennia, recharging its creative impulse, processing the harvest, allowing the incarnate portions of itself to continue unfolding without direct interference. This isn't avoidance. Seth is clear about this. It's mastery. The soul has learned that sometimes the deepest teaching comes from stepping back, from witnessing without controlling, from trusting the other aspects of yourself, still in physical reality, to discover what you already know from a different angle. Here's the permission Seth offers, and it's profound. There's no rush, no cosmic deadline, no penalty for taking your time. Your soul operates on a scale so vast that centuries are like afternoons, and what looks like absence from this side is actually presence from another. The century sleepers aren't lost. They're not trapped in some waiting room, growing impatient for their next assignment. They're actively creating, composing symphonies of probability, weaving dreams into the collective unconscious, holding space for those of us still learning through flesh. And when they're ready to return, when the integration is complete and the new chapter calls with irresistible clarity, they'll dive back in with a depth of wisdom that only long reflection can cultivate. Seth emphasizes this. Both the instant returners and the century sleepers are following their own perfect timing. Neither path is superior. Neither is more spiritual or advanced. Your soul knows its own rhythm. Trust it. Even when the world tells you there's a right way to navigate the cycles of death and birth, there isn't. There's only your way. And it's already perfect. Here's the twist that breaks every linear model of reincarnation. The revelation that Seth approached carefully because he knew how disorienting it would be. Time, as you experience it, is an illusion of the physical plane, which means your soul can reincarnate into multiple lives at once, scattered across different centuries, geographies, and even timelines. You're not living one life, then the next, in a neat chronological sequence. You're living all of them now, simultaneously, concurrently, as a single multidimensional event. Seth calls this the eternal now, the understanding that past, present, and future exist as one vast landscape that your soul experiences from a vantage point outside time. Your incarnation in 17th century France, your life in 23rd century Mars, and your current moment reading these words, all happening at once. Woven together like threads in a cosmic tapestry. This reframes everything we've discussed about waiting. When you're experiencing all your lives simultaneously, the delay between incarnations isn't a gap, it's a choice of focus. Imagine you're a film director with access to infinite footage from multiple cameras, all recording different moments. You can zoom in intensely on one scene, making that incarnation feel immediate, vivid, saturated with presence. Or you can pan out to observe the entire web of scenes playing simultaneously, making it feel like a pause, a withdrawal, a moment of overview. Neither perspective eliminates the other. They coexist. Seth describes this using a powerful metaphor. Your soul is like a company of actors performing multiple plays simultaneously on different stages. From the perspective of each character, their story is linear. They have a beginning, a middle, an end. They experience time flowing in one direction. But the actor, your soul, is experiencing all the plays at once, shifting attention between stages, sometimes focusing intensely on one role, sometimes stepping back to appreciate the entire performance. This is why past life memories aren't really memories. They're bleed-throughs. Moments when the membrane between concurrent incarnations becomes thin enough that information transfers from one focus to another. You're not remembering a previous life. You're briefly tuning into a parallel life that's happening now, in its own time frame, in the eternal simultaneity of consciousness. Here's where it gets dizzying. Every decision you make creates branches. Alternate realities where different versions of you explore different choices. Seth calls these probable selves, aspects of your identity that are just as real as the you reading this, living out the paths you didn't take. Did you choose the safe job over the risky creative venture? Somewhere, another you took the leap. Married a different person. Another you married the one you walked away from, moved to a different city. Another version stayed. All versions are you. All are real. All are happening simultaneously in the vast, multi-dimensional present. When your soul chooses to reincarnate, what it's actually doing is shifting focus, zooming in on a particular thread in the tapestry, intensifying attention on one specific probability, making that incarnation feel like the primary experience. But the others don't stop. They continue, unfolding in their own reality streams, accessible to your larger self, even if this focused consciousness isn't aware of them. Now here's the grounding insight Seth offers, because I know this can feel overwhelming. Even if your soul is omnipresent, experiencing all lives simultaneously, you, this specific focused identity, experience linearity so you can learn depth, consequence, and the exquisite texture of time. The instant and the eternal coexist, always. The focused and the vast, the singular life and the multidimensional existence. You're both the actor, lost in the role, and the director watching all the stages. You're the diver in the pool and the observer on the platform. You're the character in time and the consciousness outside it. And when you die, you don't leave this life behind to move to the next. You expand your awareness to include perspectives you couldn't access while focused here. The waiting isn't waiting. The return isn't return. It's all one vast, eternal choosing, moment by moment, focus by focus, incarnation by incarnation. You've always been everywhere. You're just learning to remember it. Where do souls go when they're waiting? Seth gives it a name that sounds technical but points to something profound. Framework 2. This isn't a place. It's not some ethereal realm floating above physical reality like a heavenly waiting room. It's a state of consciousness, the dimension where all probable events, unmanifested ideas, and reincarnational blueprints exist before crystallizing into physical matter. Think of it as the backstage of reality. The studio where everything visible on the stage of your life is first composed, designed, and prepared before stepping into the spotlight of manifestation. Seth teaches that Framework 2 is where your soul does its deepest work, between incarnations. It's the dimension where you review past lives with total clarity, free from the emotional intensity that clouded your perception while in flesh. You see the patterns, the recurring themes, the lessons you mastered and the ones you avoided. But more than that, Framework 2 is where you explore your probable selves, the alternate versions who made different choices at crucial crossroads. You can observe how those other threads unfolded, what they learned, how their experiences complement or contrast with the path you walked. It's all research, preparation, creative exploration. Because here's what Seth reveals. Framework 2 is where you architect the parameters of your next incarnation. You don't just randomly pop into the nearest available body, you compose the entry. Choose the parents who will provide the exact blend of genetics, environment, and emotional terrain you need for your next lessons. Design the challenge sets, the obstacles, opportunities, and relationships that will form the curriculum of that life. This is where the real choice happens. Not, should I reincarnate or not, but what kind of experience do I want to create next? Seth is clear. You have tremendous freedom in this design process, but you're also working within certain parameters. The laws of physical reality, the agreements you've made with other entities in your reincarnational cluster, the larger patterns of the era and culture you're entering. It's like being a playwright. You have creative freedom, but you're also working with actors who have their own arcs, a stage with certain dimensions, an audience with particular expectations. The art is in composing something meaningful within those constraints. And here's the part that bends the mind. Time in Framework 2 is elastic. What feels like a single afternoon of reflection there, a moment of reviewing one life and sketching. The outline of the next might translate to centuries in physical time, or the opposite. What feels like millennia of contemplation, processing thousands of probable selves and intricate lessons, might compress into the instant between one heartbeat stopping and another beginning. Duration is meaningless. What matters is completion. Your soul doesn't watch a clock in Framework 2. It works until the composition is ready, until the blueprint feels right, until the call to manifest becomes stronger than the desire to continue refining. Seth uses a beautiful metaphor. Some painters sketch quickly and leap to the canvas, trusting intuition and improvisation. Others spend years mixing colors, studying light and shadow, preparing every detail before the first brushstroke. Both approaches produce masterpieces. Neither is superior. Your soul's timing in Framework 2 reflects its unique creative style. But here's the revelation that changed everything for me. You're in Framework 2 right now. Even as you live this physical life, even as you navigate the tangible world of matter and time, another aspect of your consciousness is simultaneously dreaming in that invisible studio. Every night when you sleep, you return there, reviewing the day's experiences, processing emotions and patterns, exploring probable futures, making adjustments to the unfolding blueprint of your life. You're always both, incarnate and non-incarnate, focused in flesh and expansive in Framework 2, living the composition and composing the next movement simultaneously. The waiting period after death isn't separate from living. It's the same creative process, just with different focus. Death doesn't change what you are. It changes where you direct your attention, and when the next composition is complete, when the design feels irresistible, when every element of the new life calls to you with magnetic clarity, you'll make the shift. You'll narrow your focus again. Step from the studio onto the stage. Trade the vast perspective of Framework 2 for the exquisite intensity of flesh, time, and consequence. You'll dive back in, and it will feel, as it always does, like coming home. You might wonder, if souls control their reincarnation timing, why do we suffer? Why are we born into chaos, trauma, or limitation? If we're supposedly choosing this, why would anyone choose pain? This is Seth's most confronting teaching, and his most compassionate. He explains that every soul chooses the exact conditions of its birth not as punishment, but as curriculum. Not because it's being forced by karma or divine judgment, but because it recognizes those specific conditions as the optimal training ground for what it came to master. The instant returners, those who reincarnate within hours or days, are souls who crave intensity. They learn through immersion, through friction, through the electric shock of challenge. They don't want ease. They want the forge, the pressure that transforms coal into diamond. The long waiters, those who linger in Framework 2 for centuries, are souls who need space to integrate. They grow through reflection, through subtle observation, through the slow cultivation of wisdom that only distance can provide. Neither is superior. Neither is more advanced or spiritual or evolved. Your soul's timing reflects its unique learning style, its place in the larger reincarnational drama, and the agreements it made with other entities before birth. Seth warns against judging your own life as wrong or delayed. If you're here now, reading these words, breathing this breath, navigating this particular set of circumstances, it means your soul chose this moment as the optimal entry point. This body, this family, this culture, this historical moment. This exact blend of gifts and limitations, not randomly, not as punishment, as design. Because here's what Seth emphasizes over and over. You're not here to transcend physical reality. You're here to master it, to extract every possible lesson from the density, the limitation, the exquisite beauty and brutal challenge of existence in flesh. The obstacles aren't mistakes. They're the curriculum. The delays aren't failures. They're the pacing your soul chose for this particular education. But I know the question beneath the question, the fear that drives this doubt. What if I'm stuck, reincarnating forever? What if there's no escape from this cycle of birth, death, and return? Seth's answer is liberating. You're not trapped. Eventually, every soul graduates from the reincarnational cycle, not because you've earned your freedom through enough good deeds or spiritual achievements, but because you've extracted all the lessons physical reality can teach. You'll have explored every frequency of human experience, poverty and wealth, power and powerlessness, love and loss, creation and destruction. You'll have played every role in the drama, understood every perspective, mastered every challenge this particular school offers, and then you'll graduate, not into some static heaven, but into a transformation. You become something vaster, more multidimensional, capable of creating entire realities instead of just navigating them. But that's not an escape. Seth is emphatic about this. It's an expansion. You don't stop being you. You become more you. Everything you've learned through countless incarnations integrated into a consciousness so vast it can birth worlds. For now, though, you're here. In this life, in this moment. And your soul's timing, whether it returned instantly or waited centuries before choosing this specific incarnation, is perfect. Not because everything feels easy, but because everything you're experiencing is exactly what you came to learn. Trust that. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, your soul knows why you're here. And when this life is complete, when you've extracted every lesson this incarnation offers, you'll stand at that threshold again, aware, empowered, ready to choose what comes next. The timing will be perfect then. 2. We end where we began, the threshold. That moment of recognition when consciousness realizes it has survived its own ending. You now understand what Seth spent decades trying to reveal. Reincarnation isn't a system imposed on you. It's a rhythm you compose, lifetime by lifetime, pause by pause, with the creative freedom of an artist and the precision of a master architect. Whether you return instantly, driven by unfinished fire and magnetic purpose, or linger for centuries in Framework 2, integrating the harvest of countless lives and exploring dimensions most humans never glimpse, your soul's timing is never arbitrary. It's a signature, as unique as your fingerprint, as personal as your voice. reflecting your deepest nature, your learning style, your place in the vast choreography of consciousness, exploring itself through infinite forms. The 3 laws Seth revealed aren't constraints. They're descriptions of freedom, the way your own inner authority operates when you're no longer bound by physical time or cultural conditioning. The instant returners aren't reckless. The century sleepers aren't cowards. Both are following their own perfect curriculum, their own rhythm of growth and integration. And here's Seth's final teaching, the one that echoes through everything he channeled. You are not a victim of reincarnation. You are its author. Every time you die, you'll stand at that threshold again, not confused, not powerless, fully aware of who you are, what you've learned, and what possibilities stretch before you, like an infinite landscape of potential incarnations. You'll review the life you just completed, not with judgment, but with the compassionate curiosity of an artist examining their work. You'll see where you succeeded brilliantly and where you stumbled, where you loved deeply and where fear held you back, where you mastered the lessons you came to learn, and where you'll need another round with similar themes, and then you'll choose whether to dive back immediately, while the momentum is still hot and the purpose still burning, or to float in that luminous pause between worlds, resting, reflecting, observing the larger patterns before composing your next masterpiece. The promise Seth offers isn't that you'll escape reincarnation. It's that you'll never be trapped by it, because you're choosing it. All of it. The births and the deaths, the pauses and the returns, the instant plunges and the century-long integrations. You're the director, the actor and the play itself. And every performance, no matter how difficult or beautiful or strange, is teaching you something you came here to learn. So here's what I want you to do with this knowledge. Stop fearing death. Not because death isn't real, but because you now know it's a transition, not an ending. A doorway, not a wall. And stop diminishing this life by treating it as just one more obligatory round in an endless cycle. This incarnation, these relationships, these challenges, these moments of joy and heartbreak and mundane beauty, is a masterpiece your soul composed with exquisite care. Live it that way, with such ferocity and presence and gratitude that when you return to Framework 2, when you review this life from that vast perspective, you'll look at what you made of your time here and feel nothing but pride, because you'll remember, you chose this. Every obstacle, every gift, every person who broke your heart or expanded your capacity to love. You chose it because you knew it would teach you something you couldn't learn any other way. And when this chapter closes, when your last breath becomes the threshold once more, you'll stand there with full awareness and absolute freedom, ready to choose what comes next. Ready to dive back in or pause for reflection. Ready to trust your own timing, your own rhythm, your own perfect knowing. The promise. You'll always come back when you're ready, and you're always ready. Because your soul has never, not for one moment, not in any lifetime, doubted its own timing. Maybe it's time you stop doubting it too. Comment below, I understood it, and let me know. Do you think your soul will return instantly, or take the long road?